now, welcome to Lone Star Mini Restoration, episode 27, I think. Today's episode is all about comparing heel boards. I have the existing heel board in place. It's cleaned up a good bit. The rear subframe is actually mounted to it. That's what I'm doing now. I'm actually going to remove the rear subframe. So if I can get this bolt out, there's two here and there's two on that side. The plan is I'm going to compare the new Magnum heel board to the existing heel board. What I'm looking for is hole pattern matchup. If I can, right now, I'm not cutting anything out. I'm not removing spot welds or doing anything. I'm just going to play it safe and think. I think I've responded to one or two guys that this restoration to me is kind of like a chess game in that I have to think or try to think 10 steps out in front in order to make my next move, because I don't want to make a mistake, or at least if I do, I don't want it to be horrible, right? I want it to be something that I can bounce back from. So what I'm going to do now, the rear subframe is attached. I plan on removing it, and then I'll have access to the back side of the heel board. Then I'm going to take the new heel board, of course mirror it, right, and match it up and see how well the bolt pattern lines up. I will also measure the hole distance and see if they match. If they match, then I believe it's fair game for me to cut out the existing heel board, or mind you, I will reinstall the rear subframe, bolted here, two bolts here, 2 bolts there, and then, you know, of course it goes into the heel board, but I will then cut out the existing heel board, and I'll put in the new one. And I'll use the holes, I'll use the rear subframe essentially as a template for the bolts to line up to. Now, one thing I've noticed is that because I'm using the rear subframe, I think I'm playing it safe in that it's bolted here. It's got 2 bolts here, 2 bolts there. That's going to keep it from clocking this direction. However, I've noticed, I'll bring the camera in, this gap here, there's a gap between the heel board mind the gap. There's a gap between the rear subframe and the boot floor. So I'm going to make some spacers to match that exact gap. That way it will keep the subframe from the weight of it pulling down and hitting the boot floor. I want it up and off so that when I put the new mind the gap. When I put the new heel board in, it should line up beautifully. So that's my plan. I'm just going to go ahead and remove all this, and then I'll show you what I'm doing. This is the gap, again the gap, and so what I am going to prove here to myself, not to anybody else, this is a gap that I need to put a spacer in here, because when I take this bolt out right here, I'm expecting this whole thing, because of the weight of it, to drop. And I don't want that happening if I'm going to replace the heel board. Alright, it did drop. Right now it dropped about half a hole. Well, you think that's not much. You think, oh, that's no big deal. Well, to me, that's a lot. I mean, we're talking, this is a 5/16 bolt, and yep, the hole, I'm looking at this end over here, and the hole dropped. Here, I'll bring the camera around. You can see here that the hole in the rear subframe dropped almost half a hole on the heel board. Well, that's a huge deal. When you're talking anything structural and you think, oh, it's not that much, well, it's a compound effect. If I were to make that work, then it would affect down the road. So I am definitely going to make my spacers to fill the gap. Okay, so with the rear subframe removed, basically what I've done is I've just kind of made a mirror image of the heel boards. Now, what I didn't know, and of course lessons learned, was there is some depth to the boot floor, so I cannot get a perfect side-to-side match. However, let me just get an idea at least, right? You know, this metal is sharp. If I know that side's not lined up right now, however, if I were to push this side down so that the flanges at least meet, I get a absolute perfect hold-to-hole lineup on this side. Let me check the other side. If I line up these flanges here on this side, I get a perfect hold-to-hole lineup. Right off the bat, it appears that the bolt pattern lines up fairly well. So now what I'm going to do, but because I can't do an exact measurement or an exact comparison, I'm at least going to measure hole to hole, holes to holes, and on the existing, and then holes to holes on the new panel. Yeah, let's do that. I will have to elicit help on this task. All right, while I'm waiting on my wife to come help hold the tape measure, have a little do break. All right, top hole. Are you on 4?
Okay, yeah.
You're on 4?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well then that's exactly 2. So we're at 128 centimeters. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's perfect. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's it. All right, well, validation, check. Turns out that my new Magnum heel board, the hole spacing on my new Magnum heel board from left hand to right hand, where the rear subframe mounts, matches perfectly with my existing heel board. It's exactly 128 centimeters hole to hole. If somebody knows that number and you can validate it, let me know, because that's what I'm measuring. Now, I'm going to write that on here because otherwise I'll forget what that number is. But just for future reference, I'll know. So, there you have it. Let's see if you can see that. See that? 128 centimeters hole to hole. So, check. Again, I can't validate where the tunnel is and the overall shape of the heel board. However, the hole pattern matches perfectly. So now what I'll do is I will put the rear subframe back on the shell, because that is my tool, that is my alignment tool, so that when I do decide to cut the heel board out, my rear subframe will be my tooling, my jig for attachment where the holes go. So check. Hey, that's good. You know, hey, I like it when things, match. I like it when numbers match perfectly. because they do. Awesome. Now I'm going to spin the car over and think out loud, so to speak, of possible next moves. While installing the rear subframe back onto the shell, I noticed one thing. I had to stop, so I had to film this because this sucker, the rear subframe, is now sitting on the floorboard. I have both on the aft side. I have both bolts of the rear subframe bolted in place, and this sucker's sitting on the floor. So I look up here at the front of this, and these holes are not even lining up. They're like way off. I mean, they're a whole hole off. So basically that tells me that, yep, that basically tells me that, yes, indeed, I need to put spacers in here before I do the work. I'll probably put the spacer right here underneath this trunnion. Is that what it's called? Trunnion? So I need to measure this gap right here. Yeah, this will be a good starting point. So that is 0.515 inches. Start again, try over. .51. So 0.51. So what I'll do is I will start here. I'll start at like 0.515 with a hardwood block, and I'll shave it down until it fits perfectly here. Now I'll check the other side as well. Alright, so in measuring the space between the rear subframe and the boot floor, they vary from left to right. On this side, the car's upside down, so this is really the left side. I'm getting 0.51 average. On the right side, I'm getting 0.55 to 0.56. Now, that side over there appears to have had a mod. There's all kinds of patches and whatever in there. Anyhow, I'll make two blocks, two different thicknesses. One's 0.51 and one's 0.55 approximately. Put them in there to support the rear subframe no matter what. But I'm curious now as to what's going on. I'm going to put a level across. Well, it's not a rotisserie. I can't really put a level. It would have to be on the ground. But anyhow, so I have a measurement. I'm going to write that down, and I'll make those blocks. I have identified the panels that I want to order, and right now my question is, I am going to check fit the floor, no question, and I decided I am going to replace the Heelboard. I'm going to cut this out, but I'm thinking I want to address the companion bin before I close in the floor, so this may have to be next. So now I'm trying to figure out, okay, how is this guy attached? And it looks like there's a flange right inside that attaches, that is spot welded to the Heelboard right in here. And then right in here, I don't know if you can see my finger, but basically on the other side back here, the flange of the bench seat is spot welded. Looks like there's maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spot welds from the bench to the companion bin. And then, of course, you've got a flange inside that is spot welded to the B-post. It doesn't look overly complicated. I would love to replace the entire companion bin on both sides. I'm not up to speed yet with welding, and certainly not seam welding. This is thin metal, and yes, I don't want to warp it. However, I have one slight problem on whether or not I replace the entire companion bin or they have repair. M-Machine has a repair section that might fit beautifully. So my problem is my cross bracing attaches to the seat belt. So if I have to, if I decide to replace the entire companion bin, that means I have to unbolt my cross bracing. Is that a problem? Maybe not. I have to think about that. But that's where I'm at. So, all right. So this is pretty much it. So I am going to replace the heel board. I'm going to do that first. Well, here soon. I'm going to order panels that I need for the floor. That's going to be in work here soon. And now I just have to figure out my next step. I would like to replace the companion bin. And I know there's stiffeners inside the companion bin. So I've got to figure all that out. That might be my next move. Anyhow, that's where I'm at. Thanks for watching Lone Star Mini Restoration, and bye just now.